Today on NewsWatch, it's GOP debate day, and CBN News is sitting down with Donald Trump. Hear what he had to say about his faith and why he thinks he should win the evangelical vote. Plus,
this is one of the worst weather-related disasters in the history of the state of Utah.
Deadly floods sweep through Utah. See how residents are dealing with the devastation. And
I don't like to use the word failure, but I certainly think that a lot more support is needed, and it should be coming, from everyone.
Immigration crisis. CBN News is on the ground in Hungary. We'll show you what is being done to deal with the flood of immigrants coming into Europe. Thanks so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. The second Republican presidential debate is taking place tonight at the Ronald Reagan Library. Once again, frontrunner Donald Trump will take center stage, prepared for a fight. CBN's David Brody talked one-on-one with Trump in California as he was gearing up for the face-off.
I have a tremendous following.
It's probably appropriate that CBN News joined Donald Trump for a ride on his California golf course, as it seems the rest of the country has been along for Trump's wild ride, too.
Amazing! Thank you. Wow.
His rise to the top has been part showman, part politician, and a whole lot of boldness.
Did you really expect Trump mania, if you will, the Trump show, if you will? Did you really expect this to be what it is today?
Well, I always expect to win. I want to win. And I've always had a nice habit of winning. But frankly, I never thought I'd be going and surging so far ahead of everybody. I never thought that it would happen this quickly.
While his blunt style has been a hit with potential voters, his Republican opponents say they have had enough of his put-downs.
People had clear differences of opinions, but you don't have to trash talk other people to do it.
But that's not Trump's take. Whether it's jabbing Jeb Bush for his low energy or commenting on Carly Fiorina's facial appearance, he doesn't hold back. In our interview, however, he seemed ready to dial it back and divulged a weakness, a rare admission from the brash billionaire.
Obviously, we all have weaknesses, but is there something that you're like, you know what, I kind of could be better on that? Is there something that you think about on that?
Well, it's a tough question because you hate to say what your weaknesses are, but I think I could tone it down a little bit when pressed. When somebody hits you can hit a little bit less hard. At the same time, that may be the kind of thing that the country needs, because we have to hit back hard. We have to fight hard because we're not going to have a country. But I think I could tone it down a little bit, and I'll try.
One matchup to watch is how Trump handles Ben Carson. The doctor is running a close second and rivaling Trump's lead with a key demographic.
I'm leading with the evangelicals big league.
Recently, both candidates have questioned the other's faith. It's uncertain if that will make an impact, but Carson is a known commodity in evangelical circles, while Trump is not. While calling the Bible his #1 book, Trump refused to reveal his favorite Bible verse a few weeks ago. He did, however, talk scripture with us.
There's so many things that you can learn from it. Proverbs, the chapter, never bend to envy. I've had that thing all of my life where people are bending to envy. And it's an incredible book. So many things you can learn from the Bible.
He may also have to navigate other tough questions from the faithful.
The word on the evangelical street is there are evangelicals that really are interested in voting for you, but they want you to tone down the insults a little bit. They think that they can get there to vote for you if you could tone it down a little. Do you see that criticism at all?
I do, and I can understand it 100%. But, I am a certain type of person. I can understand the evangelicals to a certain extent saying, well, maybe he's not as nice as we want him to be, but they also want to see the country be great. There are some that I think will come over because I think they say, well, he may not be perfect, but he is one of us, and he's going to do a great job for the country. And ultimately, you do need that.
As for the rest of the field, Carly Fiorina makes it to the main stage, hoping to build on momentum from the first debate. Scott Walker needs to rebound from a subdued performance and dropping poll numbers as well. And Jeb Bush is expected to go on the offensive. Whatever happens, we know this. Candidates want to stay afloat during this summer of Trump that's quickly changing seasons. David Brody, CBN News, in Simi Valley, California.
Senate Democrats have done it again, filibustering a Republican attempt to vote on President Obama's nuclear deal with Iran. It is the second time they blocked the U.S. from having a say. 56 senators vote to let the Senate do its job, but Republicans needed 60 votes to get past the filibuster. Republicans point to polls showing Americans don't like the Iranian nuclear deal. The congressional review period for the deal expires Thursday, so Republicans plan to vote then on a new measure. It would stop the president from lifting sanctions on Iran unless Tehran recognizes the state of Israel and releases Americans detained in Iran. A serious storm system is responsible for jamming freeways and leaving thousands without power in Los Angeles. But all eyes are on Utah, where that same system was responsible for the deaths of at least 16 people. Caitlin Burke has the latest.
The stories coming out of Utah are heartbreaking. Floodwaters engulfing vehicles and sweeping them downstream. That's what happened to a van and SUV carrying 3 women and 13 children near the Utah-Arizona border. 3 children survived. 12 of the 16 are dead, and 1 is missing.
This is one of the worst weather-related disasters in the history of the state of Utah.
The Hilldale, Utah assistant fire chief says the flooding started overnight, catching most people off guard. The governor of Utah deploying the Utah National Guard to help with search and rescue efforts.
We're just greatly humbled by this, but we realize that, this is an act of God, and this is something that we can't control. We have to take what we receive and do the best we can.
According to the National Weather Service in Salt Lake City, the deadliest single flash flood on record in Utah prior to Monday was back in 1923. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
The Center for Medical Progress has released a new undercover video about Planned Parenthood's practice of selling aborted baby body parts. This comes as there are growing calls to defund the abortion provider. The latest video shows Planned Parenthood officials discussing how issues about harvesting fetal tissue could pose a public relations problem for the organization. It also shows the national director of Planned Parenthood's consortium of abortion providers describing the harvesting of fetal body parts as donation for remuneration.
We're trying to figure this out as an industry about how we're going to manage remuneration. The headlines would be a disaster. You decide that you want to engage in remuneration, you just really need to think that through. And think New York Times headline when you're creating your policy.
Meanwhile, Americans United for Life president is set to testify before Congress later this week about eliminating taxpayer support for the nation's #1 abortion provider. A federal court of appeals has once again denied Kim Davis's request to exempt her office from issuing same-sex marriage licenses. One day after Davis returned to work, the court shot down her request. A federal judge says Davis has not demonstrated a substantial likelihood of success in her legal bid to exempt her office from licensing same-sex marriages. However, the court did not toss her appeal out completely. Davis has one more request for reprieve pending before the court. A South Carolina judge is considering whether to release the 911 calls and other documents from the shooting deaths of 9 black church members at Emmanuel AME Church this summer. Attorneys for the victims' family say the material should not be released because doing it violates the victims' right to privacy. News organizations are challenging the judge's order, saying, quote, "While we have great sympathy to those families who have lost loved ones, under South Carolina law, these persons have no privacy rights that would outweigh the public interest in access to records which reveal the performance of government." Jury selection in the federal case has been set for early November. And still to come, closing the border, see how European countries are dealing with the flood of migrants fleeing the Middle East. At least a dozen kidnapped women and children have been freed from captivity in Nigeria. The nation's army cleared Boko Haram camps Monday in northeastern Borno State. Hundreds have been freed so far, but the Islamic extremist group continues to use dozens of girls and women in suicide bombings in the area. The army did not say where the women and children had been kidnapped from or how they were doing. Tens of thousands of migrants from the Middle East have flooded Europe, and now several countries are saying no more. For the first time in 20 years, from Hungary to Austria and Germany, the borders are closed. Gary Lane brings us this report from the Serbia-Hungary border.
The constant stream of refugees and other migrants from Turkey into Europe seems never ending. Now the word is out. At least here in this part of Eastern Europe, the border is closed. This is Hungary's border with Serbia. About 3,000 to 4,000 migrants are crossing this border every day, and that is overwhelming this tiny nation. Comparatively, that would be like 100,000 migrants crossing from Mexico into the United States each day. So what would you do? The Hungarian government erected a 100-mile fence and has now closed its border with Serbia. There's no longer free passage for refugees. Mohammed from Damascus was recently married. He and his wife, like many other refugees, found safety in Turkey. Now he wants a better life in Europe. He was among those turned away at the Hungarian border.
Can you let me cross? No, not be able to cross here. Okay, but all these people cross long road. Many countries to cross in peace. Okay,
Police sent them through a field to another crossing, but now anyone who crosses without prior approval will be arrested. The Hungarians have received plenty of criticism for not being more hospitable. The Austrian chancellor likened Hungary's treatment of the refugees to the Nazi deportation of Jews during the Holocaust. At the border, the United Nations regional representative told CBN News, while she believes Hungary can do more to help the newcomers, she understands the small country's limitations.
I think that they are making a lot of efforts. I think that there is certainly room for improvement. But Hungary is a country that has some resources, they have certain capacities, and the numbers that are now entering are so big that they exceed the capacities of Hungary.
Just before the border closed, we found most of the migrants in good spirits. Some were thirsty from making their journey in the hot sun. Volunteers provided them with drinking water and food to eat. They stood in long lines for hours. Border guards compassionately assisted them as they boarded buses provided by the Hungarian government. They were taken to processing centers before they were allowed to leave Hungary. The majority of these migrants are young men who may now find the pathway to Western Europe more difficult. Germany and Austria are also overwhelmed. They have tightened their own borders. So why now? Why are the refugees leaving camps in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan? Has the international community failed them?
I don't like to use the word failure, but I certainly think that a lot more support is needed, and it should be coming, from everyone.
In the meantime, with the Hungarian border closed, the migrants are likely to seek alternative routes through Croatia and Romania. Getting to Germany will be even more challenging. From the Serbia-Hungary border, Gary Lane, CBN News, Roski, Hungary.
Up next, they're simply not interested in marriage or sex, so more people are dying in Japan than being born. Find out what this means for their future and ours when we come back. Japan is one of the most powerful and influential countries on earth, with the third largest economy in the world. And now the nation is dying. The population is rapidly getting older, and not enough babies are being born to replenish it. George Thomas traveled to Tokyo for an in-depth look at how these changes will affect the future of Japan and the world.
Japan is shrinking, literally. Inside the Pacific Island nation, more people are dying than being born.
I'm scared for the future of my children and my country.
A demographic time bomb has already exploded, threatening to cripple the world's third largest economy.
The problem is that young women are not having enough children to keep our country going.
Japan's population has shrunk by a record 1 million since 2008. At the same time, the Japanese are living longer.
Japan is home to the fastest aging society in the entire world. There are approximately 33 million people over the age of 65. That's roughly 25% of the country. And experts warn that number could reach as high as 40%.
We're dealing with an unprecedented situation. No other country in the world is facing such a crisis.
Ruichi Kaneko is head statistician at Japan's National Institute of Population.
This is the Yamanote Line train bound for East.
He says if the situation doesn't change, and change dramatically, Japan's population will drop from 127 million today to 107 million in 2040, 87 million by 2060, and a mere 46 million by 2100.
And the rate of aging in Japan will only climb. We're projecting that by 2060, 40% of the population will be 65 years or older.
The government is in a panic. 10 years ago, it created an agency to encourage couples to have more children.
Having a family is a beautiful thing. I'm trying to encourage others to see it as a blessing and not a curse.
But a study this year shows the Japanese just aren't interested in sex or marriage. A record 50% of married couples said they've stopped having sex. Among the main reasons, 21% of men said they were too tired after work. 23% of women said sex was bothersome.
This is why Japan is known in the world as the country with very few children.
Kaneko also discovered that millions of Japanese aren't even dating. A survey he did in 2011 found 61% of unmarried men and 49% of women in their 20s and 30s were not in any kind of romantic relationship.
And if they are in a relationship, they're postponing marriage to much later in life or simply choosing to remain unmarried.
A sentiment shared with CBN News by several young folks on the streets of Tokyo.
There are more women working today than ever before, and that's good, since it will help with Japan's shrinking labor force. But this also means that women are delaying or choosing not to get married.
Life in the city is very expensive. Trying to start a family or having children will make it even more challenging.
The strain of falling birth rates, a shrinking labor force, and longer lifespans is evident at this Christian nursing home west of Tokyo. Director Satoru Gasha doesn't have the staff to care for the elderly. He must rely on church volunteers, many of whom, by the way, are over 65 themselves.
A shrinking workforce means we have older people looking after the very old. This crisis is putting a lot of pressure on the government and society to care for the aging.
In the next 25 years, experts say half of Japan's towns and small cities could lose many of their young people, especially women in their 20s and 30s, as they flee to big cities, leaving retirees behind. Tazio Marimoto already feels the impact.
There's not many children coming to church school anymore, and then only seniors means the church will have to close someday because there won't be enough people to support the church anymore.
Morimoto pastors a small church on the outskirts of Tokyo. The majority of those who attend are over 70 years old, like the Takidas, who've been married for 52 years.
Young people work so hard, they don't have time to socialize or start a family. We are praying that this changes.
Morimoto and other area pastors encourage young people to move to town.
Our local pastors here have a vision to create more Christian homes in this community, so they're providing a matchmaking between churches to encourage young people to get married, have a Christian homes.
This is Tsukumo, a community just north of Tokyo. It's indicative of many communities all across Japan, where the majority of the folks who live in these communities are over the age of 65. While some experts say the solution to Japan's grain problem are robots and foreign immigration.
Leading the charge is 68-year-old Atsuto Sawakami, who runs a popular mutual fund in Tokyo.
A robot bear for elderly care.
He's investing millions of dollars in companies developing robots to assist the elderly.
I'm interested in robotic suit technology that the elderly can wear to help them move around, plus other innovations that will help offset our shrinking labor force.
Sawakami is also calling for large-scale foreign immigration, or else he says Japan will face an economic collapse. But the idea of opening the country up to foreigners is not a popular one.
I'm not against foreigners, but this is a Japanese problem and we need to solve it.
And Japan, by the way, isn't the only society getting old fast. Moody's Investor Service says in the next 5 years, 13 countries, including France and Sweden, will be super-aged, with 20% of the population over 65. The United States will reach that milestone by 2030, along with 34 other countries. Right now, Japan leads the pack. And Kaneko says if trends don't change and the country cannot quickly find solutions, the consequences will be devastating.
The impact of our rapidly aging society will affect every area of our country.
George Thomas, CBN News, Tokyo.
It is back to school time around the world, and CBN's Orphans Promise is making sure children in poor communities have the resources they need. More than 100 children in the Arequipa district of Lima, Peru, received backpacks with school supplies at an Orphans Promise event. Superbook's Gizmo was also at the special event, so children got the chance to watch Superbook episodes as well as play and have fun with Gizmo. Orphans Promise distributed backpacks and supplies to more than 250 children in 3 different districts throughout Lima. You can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international. Well, it is now time for your Wednesday word, and today's word is reflection. I think I've said this before, but it certainly bears repeating. If you are the only reflection of Christ that those around you are seeing, what image are you reflecting? Remember, you may be the only Bible some people will ever read, and you want to shine His light bright enough to attract people to Him and the gift inside of you. Make this a wonderful Wednesday. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. We'll see you tomorrow.